This year, Suspension Secrets is sponsoring this BMW M4 GT4 behind me. So this car is a BMW G82 M4 that is in full race car form to compete in the British GT Championship. At the wheel this year, we've got Tom Wrigley and Ian Goff, and we work quite closely with Tom Wrigley outside of motorsport, so it's really cool to be continuing that partnership within motorsport to help us learn a bit more about the chassis and develop our knowledge and our products based on the feedback we get from the motorsport itself. In this video, we're going to be taking you around the car, showing you some of the finer details about what makes this a race car, and also some of the similarities between the road car and the race car, and also why we're involved this year and what we're going to be doing. Century Motorsport, who run this car in the British GT, also run the GT3 version of the BMW M4, so we had the look at the GT3 M4 and the GT4 M4, and we chose to go down the GT4 M4 route because this car is a lot closer to the road car that we see in the workshop all the time. The GT3 car is much more of a ground up motorsport car, so when you go in that wheel arch you won't recognise that compared to a road car. So you've got double wishbone conversion, you've got completely different mounting points in the chassis, the front end is a completely different concoction of suspension components that you would see over OEM, whereas the GT4 is much closer. It's got the OEM pickup points, much more resemblance to what we see on the road cars, especially at the rear end, which we'll show you soon. So we chose this platform to help us develop our knowledge of the chassis, the setup, and also feed that into our product line so we can bring out the best products for our customers to use on the road and the track. We're down at Silverstone today for the first test for the GT4 car. So this is effectively the first shakedown with Tom and Ian at the wheel, and it's also a day just to learn the chassis for them and also to do a bit of setup tuning and just get a better handling for the car. In this video we're going to be taking a closer look at underneath, so we want to be showing you what makes this a race car, but also what is the same as the road car and the similarities that run between the two, and see what we can take from this car and how we can apply that into our product line and our setups to make your road car even better for the road and the track. We thought we'd start up front by showing you the engine, because in actual fact, despite this being a race car, it's actually the same engine that you get in the road car, and if anything it's actually a little bit detuned to make it apply with the regulations. So when we're setting the faster lap times out on track, it's not due to it being a race car and having a really big, powerful, different engine. It's actually similar to what you'd get in the road car M4, but what makes it so much faster is actually the chassis and the suspension tuning that goes into this to make it handle as well as it does, and also get it nice and lightweight to make it as fast as it is out on circuit. One major difference you will notice up front is the bodywork. So this bodywork is not OEM, it's a lot lighter all around the car, but it's not carbon fibre, it's actually flax. So that is an organic compound that effectively makes the panel, and it's a lot more eco-friendly than carbon fibre production, and it also responds in a crash a lot better in terms of splintering. So a carbon fibre panel will smash and splinter and can cause a lot of punctures, whereas the flax panels, they'll bend and they'll split a little bit nicer, so in an impact there's less damage caused, which is quite a nice feature. The actual car, due to all of the flax panels, is roughly 100 kilos lighter than the M4 CSL that you see on the road, and that's despite having a full welding roll cage, which often adds a lot of mass to a chassis anyway. So with all those panels added, the weight is down a lot, which makes the chassis more responsive and helps it to accelerate and decelerate a lot easier, and also helps with the weight transition through the corners to help the lateral load transfer be a lot smoother and not overload the tyre quite as much. So up front, we've got the front suspension system, and obviously we've got these massive front brake assemblies. Behind that, we've got quite a few trick suspension components. So we'll start with the most obvious, which is the coilover kit. So this is a 4-way KW coilover. It's got custom top mounts to give it effectively as much camber and caster as we can get into the chassis. If we lower our eye down a little bit, we've got an OEM upright, and then at the front, we've got a bump steer and roll center corrected tie rod end. So that's a machined component that has the bump steer machined into it for the amount the car has been lowered by to take the front bump steer out of the chassis. What bump steer is as the wheel goes up and down, the toe angle keeps changing. So that's unsettling if you're turning into a corner and you think the outside wheel is going into bump, the inside is going into droop, and both wheels could be doing opposite things in terms of toe, which gives nervousness in the steering. And it also means that you can cause understeer, as the tyres can effectively start turning away as you begin to turn in and lower that suspension up. So it's key in a race car to eliminate that bump steer. So that's what this tie rod end does in here. If we come to the bottom, we've got adjustable tension and control arms, so that gives more caster and camber adjustment into the chassis. This is again key to get the handling perfect, especially when we're running slicks. We need a lot of camber up front, and we want to get as much caster into that chassis as possible, particularly on the BMW chassis. They love caster. These are all components we're going to be developing very soon for the G8X platform, and we're going to be applying that into the F8X platform as well. So again, really exciting that we can be here with the guys in the pits, learning about the car and also applying that knowledge into our products as we develop them. At the rear, things are a little bit more familiar. So again, in the way here, we've got a massive rear braking package. You can't really get around that, but behind that, we're getting a lot more OEM, things we're a lot more used to seeing in the workshop. So first of all, we've got the OEM subframe. So the subframe in here is the same that you would find in the back of your G8X M car. So the G80 M3, G82 M4, this is the subframe you're going to have installed. What's different about this is you've got the adjustable rear anti-roll bar. So that's a BMW Motorsport item, which gives 5 positions of adjustment to tune that mid-corner oversteer, understeer, which is a really nice feature to have, especially on a race car. Again, as the front, we've got the rear coilover, again a 4-way KW coilover. The 4-way allows us to really fine-tune how the car behaves through the corner and over the curbs, and how that is able to respond into the chassis. So a really nice way of fine-tuning and dialing in that chassis to get the grip. At the back, we've got all adjustable arms. So these are actually all arms that we currently make. So we've got the rear adjustable tow arm, we've got the rear upper camber arms, and we've got the rear lower traction arm. These are all BMW Motorsport items. So these all come from the factory. They're manufactured by BMW, but they're for the motorsport application. So we make all of our arms in a similar fashion, and you can actually get those on our shop now. They're all in stock, and you can effectively get your rear end to perform more like this GT4 car out on track and on the road. Interestingly enough as well, the bearings used by BMW Motorsport are the same as we use in our own products. However, ours are actually a size up, as they can take more load than the race car components, because on the road there's a lot more input from potholes and just general wear and tear. So we actually size up our bearings over the Motorsport option to get even more longevity and reliability out of our arms. Another nice feature on this is the billet lower control arm. This is something we will be developing too, and it's quite an interesting product. So as you move at the rear to a true coilover setup, so that's where the spring is around the rear damper, whereas OEM, the spring is separate to the rear damper at the back. So you have a coffin arm on the rear of BMW, the spring is sat in one part of it, the damper locates more towards the wheel. When you move to a true coilover, you're putting that spring force through the damper mounting point. This is okay for a road and a light track rate, but as you move to a really stiff race setup, especially when you're running a slick tyre, the OEM coffin arm can't take that load through that mounting point. It's not designed for it. So these arms are an uprated billet arm that's a lot stronger at that mounting point, and it can take all that force from the really stiff spring that this car runs, and it means that there won't be any breakages, much more reliability, and it can also be machined in a position to fine-tune the wheel rate, which is something we'll come to in a different video, but it effectively means you can almost tune how the damper and spring work with the wheel at the rear of the car, which is a really nice feature. Another feature in the suspension system on this car is roll center adjustment. So the front and the rear suspension each have components that adjust the roll center of the chassis. So when you're lowering the car, your lower control arms are basically on a bigger angle, and that adjusts the position of your roll center, and that can effectively make the car feel too wallowy if you go in low with the car with the OEM pickup points. When they're adjusted, the roll centers get moved into a position to make the car feel a lot tighter and more firm, similar in a way to fit in stiffer roll bars. That's kind of how the roll center reacts to the chassis. It's really important though in a car like the M4. So this car is out there competing with the McLarens, which are a bit lighter than this. They have a little bit less power as well, but still, this car still has a bit more mass than a lot of the cars on the grid in the GT4 category. That means it's even more important to be controlling the chassis and controlling those roll centers to make sure the chassis is responding exactly how we want through the corner. Because if we don't do that, the weight of the car can take over, and it can lean to a car that's going to be leaning way too much through the corners, and it's going to make it very hard to compete up at the front with the other cars on the grid. So roll centers on this particular chassis are extremely important to get nailed. We're with Tom now, who's one of the drivers of the car, and we work closely with Tom outside of motorsport, so it's really cool to be working alongside him within motorsport as well. So last year you were in the McLaren. Yeah. So how do you find this compares, and why did you make the move from the McLaren into the BMW?
The McLaren was a good car last year. I think on a one-lap pace it's probably got the advantage on this, but sometimes in the race, the longer races, it's suffered a bit with heating issues, and maybe harder on the tyres. But obviously the main reason is obviously my business, Tomley Performance, which does BMW tuning. It makes more sense for me to be driving a BMW race car on the track. And it's a bit more from what I've come from, front engine, rear wheel drive. It's a bit more of a familiar territory for me really within racing.
Yep. And how did you find, so compared to like the road car M4, which obviously you got the M3, how did you find the race car compares out the box?
Yeah, I mean, with this car, it's obviously a lot less power than the other ones like this. So it's quite hard to kind of judge with that. But there is some similarities for sure. I mean, obviously it runs all your suspension stuff on my own road car, so you know it's very comparable in a lot of ways. It's just obviously there is extra power, and it's four-wheel drive. But you know the actual sensations of how the car moves with all your parts on, you know, does relate a lot to the race car. Awesome. Yeah, so we're looking forward to the rest of the year. This is the first test day, so we've got a few more test days this month, which we'll be covering, and then we're into the races, right? So obviously Donington next week, then Alton, and then the end of the month, the first race at Alton Park. Yeah, so awesome. Very much looking forward to that, mate, and yeah, should be good. Mega cool. Right, we'll leave you to it. Get back out testing. Thank you. All right.